In the Warhammer 40k universe, orcs are pretty much the only culture having any fun. If you need proof of that, try the game Speed Freaks, which is on the PC right now. Here you basically grab a vehicle and drive around in one of two different game modes, crumping the hell out of each other while achieving some kind of objective. They're pretty straightforward, and for the most part, it's a fun game. But let me elaborate on a few things. Of the two game modes, I'm going to talk about Death Rally first. That's Death, D-E-F-F. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty standard race, but the reality is you are actually trying to take objective points before you dash for the finish line. There's plenty of violence in the mode. You have to basically fend off the enemy while you race around some orc-looking stuff and basically try to claim it. And there's plenty of in-game chatter to tell you what's going on and direct you to the proper place to get in on the action. Once you take the objective, then everybody races for the finish line and it tells you who basically scored first. I honestly can't tell what it matters who gets across the finish line first. There's a point total based on how many of the objectives you took and that sort of thing. So ultimately, getting to the finish line is more of a bragging rights thing than it is anything else. It is really cool. I enjoy that one a lot. Of the two, it's a little bit of a quicker game mode than the other one, which I'll talk about in a moment. It is also the one that I think we would get introduced to first because it is a little bit simpler in the sense that you just drive to a point, fight, drive to the next point, fight, so on and so forth. There's not a whole lot of strategy to that besides everybody should stay on the point and fight on the point. Don't go wandering around. But, you know, these are people playing orcs. They're going to be crazy, and I would expect nothing less. Anyway, that's really all there is to say about Death Rally. There's not a whole lot to it. Go beat up each other, kill orcs, have a great time. Speaking of killing, let's talk about Kill Convoy. It's an escort map with a twist. You're trying to get your Stampa to get across the finish line while slowing down the enemies. This happens by collecting bombs and then driving them directly into the opposing Stampa. Whichever Stampa gets across the finish line first wins, and while it sounds very simple, there's a little bit more to it in the sense that you do have to really focus on slowing those things down, and the violence is a little bit less the point than in Death Rally. So in Death Rally, since you're swarming a point and blasting each other, there's probably more direct action in that. Whereas in Kill Convoy, if you're cruising around your Stampa, that Stampa will actually trash the enemies as they come in. It blasts at them too. So you can't just race around an enemy Stampa and do whatever you want. It will eventually just blow you up and kill you. So you do have to be a little bit more careful in that regard. Not to say that you don't get to blast the hell out of plenty of orcs. In fact, because the game mode is longer, you tend to get, at least I've noticed, more kills. Anyway, that's enough about Kill Convoy, and that's because these two game modes are very straightforward. They're still a lot of fun. It doesn't need complication. I mean, you are playing orcs, driving around in crazy vehicles, blowing each other up. So making that overly complicated wouldn't be super orky. But let's talk about some of the things that I have a criticism about, and it's not the gameplay. Something that made me sad about the game is that it was free to play, which means there's a loot pass or a season pass, if you will, and a whole bunch of stuff to buy with real money. And while there's no pay to win, there's plenty of stuff they'll take your money for. The season pass I just mentioned, they call it the WA path. When you start playing on that, there are the free things like in every other one that you encounter in every other game. But then there's stuff that you've got to pay $10 to unlock as you go along those levels. Most of them are cool-ish. I'm not entirely sure that it would be worth $10 unless you were just so all in on the game that you just had to have all that stuff. It's, like every other game that has these kind of passes, your mileage will vary based on what you want out of it. You have another currency besides the paid for currency. By the way, the paid for currency is teeth, because the orcs peddle in teeth, which is just horrifying. You also get a thing called scrap, but scrap's kind of just experience that brings you along the WA path and grants you the various stuff at the different levels. It includes a few new vehicles, it looked like. I didn't really dive too much into it because, again, it doesn't really impact the gameplay, and there are other ways to unlock the vehicles. So let's talk about the most important part of the game, which are the vehicles. There's 8 as of right now, but I have no reason to believe they won't release more. Each one plays fairly differently, too. The Boom Daka Snaz Wagon, it has a turret and a Molotov cocktail. It's got a speed boost and a smoke screen thing. It's quick, maneuverable, it's really versatile. It's the one that I played a whole lot, and in the footage that I've taken here, it's the one that I played. I honestly love it. I think it does a great job. It's also the first one they dumped me with when I tried the game the first time. There's also the Looted Wagon, which is basically a tank. It can take a lot of punishment, dish plenty out, but it's slow and hard to move. There's the Rucka Truck Squig Buggy, which can heal other vehicles, so you've got some support function too. Each of these has a pretty cool feature. The drag stick and teleport. I mean, it's just a lot of fun, and it really does add some diversity to the play map, especially when you're driving around and you see someone in the drag stun, it just winks out and disappears, and then, you know, stuff goes on over to your right and you just see explosions, and now there's a tank throwing shells at you. It's totally chaotic. It's exactly what you expect. You can easily spawn a vehicle to change in the middle of a map, so if you didn't like what you're driving, you can respawn with another one with no problem. You can survive for quite a while, but I'd say that there's plenty of death to keep you hopping around to different cars if you want to. The time to kill is a little long on some of the vehicles, unless you hit them with your secondaries. Like, for instance, when I smack them with my Molotov and then unload on them, they do tend to die a little bit quicker. But for the most part, they can take quite a bit of punishment. And I kind of feel like that works in this because these vehicles are these ramshackle monster trucks from an Orc Road Warrior experience. So ultimately, I think that works out the best. So there's not a lot to complain about here gameplay wise. I mean, you're playing an Orc. You're driving around blowing up other Orcs. They do that pretty well in this. Even when the vehicles flip over and casually go back to their wheels, or you get stuck on walls, none of that really bothered me because the graphics are really cool and the premise is so simple, and honestly that goofy stuff really plays into the model of playing an Orc. So if that kind of stuff would bother you, you might have trouble. But ultimately, when you play Speed Freak, you can't come into this thinking I've got to be dead serious. All of my issues are really outside the game. The fact it's free to play means they got to make their money somewhere, so they went with the paid shop, and all the cosmetics are there. And while you can customize the look of your vehicle in Orc, I just didn't really feel the need to do so. It's not like you're really paying attention to the way they look while you're playing. It's too fast paced. Stuff is exploding, lots of particles. I mostly just focused on shooting anything that had a red name over it, so I didn't care what I looked like. At the time of this video, the game's still in early access, so having all that paid stuff in place is probably shifty, but I mean, that kind of happens now too, so I also really doubt that there's anything left for them to do in the game. It's pretty much ready to go. They did a big patch recently that fixed some things, so I think it's only in early access just to say it is, so that they can have a slight excuse for any kind of bugs that come up. Ultimately, this game's pretty well done. So, all that said, the shop doesn't take away from the action or the fun of the game itself, so if you're remotely interested in taking Orcs on a wild ride of explosions and murder, and you've got a PC that can handle it, then you may as well try Speed Freaks. It's totally worth your time. So get out there and crump some boys. It's your time to WoW. Yes, I said it.